Hi, my name is Ashley Poupart, and today we'll be talking about decoding sustainability in the wine grape industry. So this presentation will talk about several different things. It will include agricultural sustainability in the wine grape industry, why sustainability is needed, the role of specified frameworks for evaluating environmental impacts, principles of agricultural sustainability, system approaches for sustainable vineyard management, how sustainable agriculture is more than just a trend, internal and external pressures attributed to the adoption of sustainable practices, farming paradigms that produce biodynamic, organic, and sustainable wine, certifications and their role in the industry, process versus practice-based certifications, commonalities of these certifications, and how it relates to achieving sustainability, what a holistic sustainable vision is and how it's developed, what a sustainable vineyard might look like, and all my conclusionary remarks. Environmental impacts and why we should care. First, they'll start us off with a quote. There are no major issues forecasted in our common future for which the foreseeable trends are favorable, which was stated by the IPCC in 2007. So how is this related to the wine grape industry? The advancements in developed countries have created a foundation in which food production is one of the most energy and resource intensive activities that consumers can participate in. The environmental impacts associated with food product systems will become even more severe and is predicted to increasingly surpass the planetary boundaries. For the wine grape industry, the future viability of wine production is directly linked to its environmental impacts and condition in which it's required to operate. Thus, the impacts related to the production of wine grapes are directly influenced by the amount of materials, energy, waste, and the emissions the product releases during its life cycle of producing wine. An example of these relative environmental impacts for a California packaged wine can be seen on the right-hand side in the diagram. Now, this is not a full representation of every single vineyard, but it's more of just an example of a life cycle assessment that was done, so you can see where the emissions mainly stem from the processing activities. So this relationship to emissions, along with energy and resource-oriented management, is creating some of the world's most challenging sustainability issues related to things such as climate change, ozone depletion, acidification, resource depletion, ecotoxicity, environmental degradation, erosion of biodiversity, pollution, health threats, urbanization, and land use management challenges. The cumulative effects of these environmental impacts generates an extensive pressure on our ecosystem services in which we depend upon for our continued existence. Therefore, we must identify possible management strategies that reduce these environmental impacts. So how do we accomplish this? Growing involvement in sustainable agricultural development means that there is an increasing investment and engagement in sustainability within the wine grape industry to mitigate these challenges. This emerging interest in sustainability is growing, and an understanding of the role in the wine grape industry offers an insight into how sustainability can address key issues within its agricultural sector. So the next thing we should ask ourselves, is wine grape growing an unnatural process? Well, to understand sustainability within the wine grape industry, we must first understand how wine grape growing is indeed an unnatural process. As Cliff Omar once stated, the act of farming, no matter how natural, leaves an environmental footprint. The industry itself is plagued with many environmental concerns, and even with incorporating some of the top management practices, there are still numerous stressors that make the cultivation of grapes exceptionally arduous. These stressors can include, but are not limited to, land use changes, which are required to cultivate a vineyard, and it typically removes all of the natural flora and fauna from the land, which creates a more ecologically simplistic system than the natural habitat it replaced. In other words, decreased biodiversity. Management techniques typically incorporate fertilizer, pesticides, and other energy-intensive activities or inputs, which is linked to generating higher rates of emissions. While the use of exotic wine grape varieties that are not native to North America provide genetic selection for maximum benefits of growing the vine here, it increases the susceptibility of the vine to local insect, disease, and other biotic stressors. Thus, attempting to cultivate wine grapes means that nothing about the process is totally natural. The act of producing wine grapes with minimal levels of disturbance requires that growers pursue sustainable viticulture and vinicultural protocols to help preserve the industry. Role of a life cycle assessment in the wine and grape industry. So if you don't know what a life cycle assessment is, An LCA basically provides a framework that can identify a system's relative environmental impacts and identify hotspots in supply chains that can be targeted for improvement. So an LCA examines all of the life cycle phases of producing wine that can include but are not limited to viticulture practices, the types of grapes cultivated, scope of processing activities like viniculture, use of packaged materials, so bottles, corks, labels, the transportation links, consumption patterns, and the final disposal of the wine. The ecological management of agroecosystems that address the environmental impacts stemming from these systems can lead to a redesign of agricultural practices at the landscape and winery scale. Thus, using a life cycle assessment provides an additional means of understanding how the wine grape industry can achieve the benefits of ecological, social, and an economic growth strategy that is sustainable. Currently, for agricultural systems, there is considerable variability in inventory data between individual agricultural stakeholders. Some of these aspects that create variability include different management practices, microclimates, transportation modes, nutrient inputs, etc. These variabilities mean that growers use many distinct methods in order to gather their data or not gather their data, which means that evaluating the success of sustainability metrics at different sites are often incomparable with one another. Using a life cycle assessment provides a means of modeling and inventory analysis and the ability to compare these systems across numerous sites. This is because this system's approach requires the use of similar scopes so that sustainability concepts can be compared. However, as I mentioned, in many cases a wine grape grower or a winery owner is unaware of how they generate their environmental footprints due to the fact that they don't collect the necessary data and identify the processes that generate their emissions. So this is an area that could use improvement. What are the principles of agricultural sustainability? Well, sustainable wine growing is an attractive philosophy that focuses on the principles of conventional agriculture while enhancing environmental quality and the resource base in which agricultural production depends. Any farming practice that takes place on the agricultural plot of land are all a part of a complex ecosystem, which in turn can affect or be impacted by global economics and even global ecological processes. Sustainable agriculture requires the farmer to adopt the system's perspective that involves viewing multiple factors when considering field, farm, and winery level decisions. However, sustainable farming does not have a universal definition and can mean countless things to different stakeholders. These variabilities stem from different wine grape cultures, economic means for implementing sustainability practices, and regulatory principles. Still, all agricultural sustainability definitions have several constant features which are known as the 3 E's of sustainability, or known as the triple bottom line. The 3 E's of sustainability promote practices that are environmentally sound, socially equitable, and economically viable. Thus, all definitions relating to agricultural sustainability play a key role in adjusting viticulture and vinicultural tactics that mitigate environmental impacts, which is done by promoting ecological stewardship, reinforcing the connection between wine and the community, promoting employee and consumer health, and increasing economic sustainability. Systems approach for sustainable vineyard management, promoting grape and wine grape quality. The main goal of any grower is to create a high-quality wine grape and wine product. Sustainability methods have been linked to producing high-quality wine grapes, which focus on integrating biological and ecological processes, which can include, but are not limited to, water conservation, increasing energy efficiency, maintaining soil health by minimizing the use of inputs that can cause harm to the environment, promote health of workers, and ensure consumer well-being, improve self-reliance and make productive use of knowledge and the skills of farmers and workers, use technology and best ecological management practices, such as the intensification of natural, social, and human capital, asset, and resources, use technological advances to promote efficiency, monitor inputs that promote biodiversity, focus on integrated pest management systems and comply with prohibited materials lists, and focus on a measure to manage approach. So what does that mean? Well, you can't manage what you don't measure. So in other words, evaluating your performance or metrics that can be benchmarked and measuring how sustainability is addressed at a specific site is necessary. Pursuing initiatives that balance these sustainability principles affect how growers choose to implement those processes and how these metrics are achieved. While all systems approaches have their advantages and disadvantages, analyzing the characteristics of their systems approach or management styles is essential for deciding which program meets a grower or winery owner's needs. One of the examples will be certifications, which we'll discuss in a little bit. Sustainable agriculture and how it's more than just a trend. The shift towards sustainable vineyard development has become a primary objective from a political, economic, and social point of view. As the scope of environmental problems rises, so do the opportunities for innovation of sustainable processes and products in the pursuit of a sustainable competitive advantage. Thus, your brand. Environmental concerns have progressively found a diffusion among wineries and have become strongly related to a corporate image. According to the resource-based view, or the RBV theory, sustainability practices can contribute to performance and represents one of the strategic choices that a firm can make. The RBV states with the assumption that the desired outcome of managerial efforts is the establishment of a sustainable competitive advantage. So the basic elements of an effective environmental management set of standards are described in the iOS 14001 standards, and as such, ISO 14001 standards can be thought of as a resource that improves the quality of management and provides a means of operational efficiencies. These efficiencies can stem from financial benefits, which can include a reduction in the regulatory fines, use of technological advances that offer high-quality, differentiated wine products at lower prices. And it can emulate a competitive advantage via differentiation of the wine by enhancing one's reputation as a sustainable entity. Research indicates that consumer recognition as well as consumer acceptance of an eco-label are a major component of a consumer's willingness to purchase wine. Thus, consumers look at eco-labeling as a means of differentiation of one product from another. Pursuing these cost reduction initiatives and improving efficiencies to promote competitive advantages within the wine sector shows that a firm's performance offers higher quality differentiated products at lower prices and can placate external stakeholders. Therefore, pursuing these cost reduction initiatives, improving efficiencies, differentiating one's product, and pursuing sustainability can proactively spread a green orientation among vineyards and wineries, and highlights the value of actually pursuing a sustainability framework in the agricultural sector. Internal and external pressures attributed to sustainability behavioral changes. The shift towards sustainable vineyard development, as we mentioned in the last slide, is a primary objective from a political, economic, and social point of view. By attributing sustainability as a behavior adopted by the wine grape industry and their response to internal drivers, external drivers, and their motivation behind the participator, we can see how these pressures affect a firm's orientation towards sustainability. This partially explains the difference in the overall degree of or orientation towards sustainability at a firm or at the regional level. Each of these drivers plays a role in creating sustainable awareness among grape growers and wineries. Internal drivers are typically ethical motives inspiring top management and entrepreneurs, as well as strategic intentions based on the recognition of an advantage that might arise from sustainability. External drivers are pressures that arise from institutions, customer expectations, communities, environmental groups, regulators, and competitors. Understanding the role of these drivers will lead to a better modeling and consideration of how sustainable vineyard development implements policies that are targeted for reducing environmental impacts associated with wine grape production. Sustainability concepts, understanding relationships between biodynamic, organic, and sustainably produced wine. So there are three main types of wine growing farming practices that focus on organic, biodynamic, and/or sustainable principles. While organic and biodynamic can offer some benefits, these programs are not as robust as sustainable mitigation tactics because in terms of organic, and sustainable don't always coincide within the agricultural sector. In terms of viticulture and viniculture activities, organic and conventional agriculture have numerous competing merits. However, there are several obstacles that can arise from organic farming. These complications are based on the acquisition and application of naturally derived fertilizers and pesticides, which are often related to higher rates of emission and energy use from these inputs. In terms of the program itself, organic wine must follow the U.S. National Organic Farming Standards, which defines a farming method as prohibiting the use of additives or alterations to the natural seed, plant, or animal, including but not limited to pesticides, chemicals, or genetic modifications. Organic certifications must also contain at least 95% organically produced ingredients and cannot use sulfates in the preservation processes. Biodynamic wine varies from organic wine since it is viewed in its entirety as a complex living organism. Farming methods focus on 6 principles that include crop rotation, composting, plant diversity, homeopathic fertilizers, animal life, seasonal, and planetary cycles. The use of manure-based fertilizers in organic and biodynamic farming can release higher rates of nitrous oxide, nitrogen into the air, and leach ammonia and phosphorus into the soil. Similarly, although the application of organic pesticides may lead to lower toxicity-related emissions, organic pesticides typically have a higher environmental impact due to the amount of energy that is required in their manufacturing processes. However, it is important to note that these results are dependent on site-specific variables, the parameters examined, assumptions that are made, the types of products that were analyzed, and the geographical differences of each vineyard, meaning climate, disease presence, temperature, humidity, etc. Thus, advocating for organic or biodynamic certifications does not necessarily equate to be a sustainable process for every vineyard. Instead, sustainable certifications create robust site-specific solutions based on benchmarking metrics that correlate with producing high-quality fruit that makes good wine, promotes ecological stewardship, offers social fairness, and economic profitability. Thus, sustainably produced wine offers the best way to reduce one's environmental footprint while achieving the 3 E's of sustainability. Certifications and their role in the industry. More regional sustainable farming certifications programs exist for wine grapes than for any other crop in the United States. One might ask themselves, why isn't there a singular push for developing national sustainable agricultural standards that unify these principles? First, viticulture and viniculture activities are extremely complex enterprises that involve infinite practices that differ significantly between vineyards, wineries, and regions where they are grown. Thus, certification industries have formed numerous trade associations to meet local wine grape growing challenges in various regions. Secondly, many sustainable wine growing practices are correlated with producing high quality fruit that makes good wine. Thirdly, terroir is a key aspect in wine marketing, and many regional wine growers want to connect their regional identity with sustainable farming practices to carve out their own niche in the marketplace. Finally, every winery is its own brand, and by choosing a sustainable marketing program that best fits their needs, it's important in establishing a regional sustainable certified program. Thus, accredited wine grape certification systems provide a holistic sustainable foundation that shows how local economic systems can effectively respond to environmental challenges, ensure long-term health, biodiversity, productivity of the farm, and address internal and external pressures. So why should a wine grape grower pursue a certification program instead of just adopting these principles on their own? Well, certification programs add a new element for labeling something as sustainable by adding credibility to the claims about the practices that are being implemented within a vineyard or a winery. To become certified, a firm must follow a group of standards that are put in place by the certification program and be audited by a third party to demonstrate credibility to relevant stakeholders. Research indicates that consumer recognition as well as consumer acceptance of an eco-label are a major component of a consumer's purchasing decision. Thus, consumers look at eco-labels as a means of differentiating one product from another. Certifications provide incentives for enhancing sustainable farming practices by providing credibility with the eco-labeling process. The rigor of a certification program is governed by the benchmarking metrics and sustainable nature of the certification standards. Pursuing sustainable certification programs that are robust, transparent, and credible help instill consumer confidence that the wine they are purchasing is truly sustainable. Currently, there are numerous sustainable certification programs for the wine industry, and each certification has differing founding principles, even if there is a lot of overlap, that help vineyards and winery owners alter managerial attitudes, promote ecological stewardship, address environmental concerns, promote employee safety, and numerous other metrics. They can be benchmarked and measure how sustainability is addressed at site-specific areas. Pursuing initiatives that balance these sustainable principles affect how growers choose to implement these processes and how various certifications will influence how these metrics are achieved. Process versus practice-based certifications. Certification programs all have their advantages and disadvantages, and picking one program can be a daunting task. Once a grower decides to pursue a certification program, one may ask themselves, how can I choose the one that works best for me? Thus, growers can pursue two main certification models known as a process-based and practice-based model. Some examples of these models can include, but are not limited to, the California Certified Sustainable Wine Growing Program, CCSW, which is a process-based model, whereas SIP-certified Lodi Rules, Napa Green, and Live all use practice-based models. Now, if you notice, Napa Green at the very bottom has two other entities that branch off. This is because Napa Green certification is actually conducted through third-party auditors such as Fish Friendly Farming or LandSmart. So they're more of a marketing company rather than them actually performing the certification themselves. But due to the name recognition within the public eye and its competing name in the sustainable certification area, it was included as an example. So how does a grower qualify for a process-based certification program? Well, a participator must complete a wine growing self-assessment workbook each year and create an action plan to improve criteria in one or more of the practice areas of wine grape growing, implement the action plan, and demonstrate that the grower is continuously improving over a period of time in one or more of the designated criteria. Meaning that while there are a set of prerequisite practices that must be implemented to pre-qualify for certification, a grower must score a 2 or better, with a practice in category 1 being the least sustainable and 4 being most sustainable, or score 1 but have an action plan in place to raise the score to a 2 over a period of time. In other words, continuous improvement. Thus, process-based certifications ensure that a higher percentage of wine growers and wineries can participate and focus on a continuous improvement strategy for implementing sustainability standards. Once a self-assessment has been performed and documented, an annual third-party audit verifies that the following criteria are being met and one or more areas of environmental, social, or economic concern are identified. Once the action plan is incorporated and completed over the designated time period, the participant will complete the self-assessment again to see if any improvements have been made. If improvements have been found, then new areas of concern will be addressed. If improvements have not been achieved, then the original action plan is re-examined and alterations are made to ensure that continuous improvement occurs the next time around. This approach helps address site-specific and organizational issues that provide a baseline so that a firm can focus their limited resources on implementing practices that will make the most impact and help them retain certification year after year. In a practice-based certification system, every metric that is required is demonstratable, auditable, and has a performance-based threshold that must be met to achieve certification status. Meaning that while a process-based program focuses on continuous improvement regardless of the number or level of sustainable practices being used, the practice-based program focuses on implementing a minimum set of specific practices and or accumulate a minimum set of points by implementing specific parameters that are required for certification. Practice-based certifications can have their own wine growing self-assessment workbooks with various benchmarking and management techniques that are required for certification. Certification requires self-assessments along with documentation to assess the level of sustainability practices being used. Once a self-assessment has been conducted, a third-party audit is required to ensure that the sustainability practices are being met. Complying with these metrics, along with restrictions on crop protection practices, are generally an additional requirement for most practice-based certifications. Due to the variability in many of the program requirements, links have been added to the slide so that you can examine the workbooks yourself and evaluate which sustainability principles are most important to the certification program. Commonalities of certification and how this relates to achieving sustainability. Both practice-based and process-based certifications have their own roles within the industry. Thus, regional sustainable wine growing certification programs can focus pretty much on all aspects of growing wine grapes, so farming practice standards are comprehensive for each region. Certification programs also who are accredited will require a third-party verification system that helps prevent greenwashing. So in other words, a vineyard can't claim or a winery can't claim that they're sustainable without proof. All holistic visions that are created through a certification program are site-specific and focus on achieving some range within the sustainability spectrum, whether through continuous improvement or through a point scale system. Since transparency is an essential part of a sustainable certification program, potential members can look at these programs and determine exactly how the program was developed, evaluate its rigor, and choose a certification that works best for them. Throughout the process-based wine growing programs, participants are required to attend educational workshops and use wine growing workbooks to conduct annual self-assessments of a vineyard and winery sustainability performance metrics. The same thing can happen with a practice-based certification program. Each certification system requires minimum thresholds that must be upheld throughout the year that meet the 3 E's of sustainability. Failure to do so can result in your certification being taken away. Incorporating specified restriction lists for crop management is also usually a requirement. While no certification is perfect in its entirety, certifications play an integral role within the industry by helping consumers understand sustainability needs, creating high-quality wine grapes, enforcing rigorous standards, prevents greenwashing, ensures economic viability, and promotes a positive work environment that meets the needs of the community. For most certifications, the first standard for developing a holistic vision is to devise a sustainable strategy. A holistic vision provides a foundation for the firm that ensures long-term health, enhancing biodiversity, and promotes productivity of the farm or winery. Creating this vision along with pursuing a certification program allows the participator to evaluate each of their proposed practices as a means of moving towards or away from their vision while responding to social, economic, and environmental pressures. Participators attend various workshops through the certification agency and work towards developing sustainable goals, active partnerships with relevant stakeholders, focus on resource conservation for better farm management techniques, employ social equity, and increase biodiversity through land-based management techniques. Generally, each sustainable vision should be site-specific due to the physical boundaries on the property, climatic conditions, prevalence of biotic stressors, defined sustainability goals, different wine grape cultures, stakeholder expectations, regulatory requirements, and the amount of income a grower can afford to implement sustainable practices at their vineyard or winery. Thus, a general breakdown of what each of these requirements may look like for meeting these standards can be seen on the table to the right. So what does a sustainable vineyard look like? Attempting to answer this question with a singular vision or set of sustainability principles is in many ways impossible. It should be noted that the conservation and biological enhancement mechanisms mentioned in this slide are probably not found at every vineyard or winery, because every holistic and sustainable vision will be site-specific. Sustainable viticulture and vinicultural methods can include some or all of these principles depending on how growers choose to achieve their sustainability goals. Overall, the goal of sustainable agricultural development is to address sustainability in a manner that achieves the 3 E's of sustainability. So envisioning what that may mean requires a detailed look at the individual and site-specific farm plan that has been developed in a workshop, along with specific LCA emissions generated from the farmer's activities and the certification programs that a vineyard pursues. While some of the founding principles will be the same at some vineyards, how these metrics are implemented or achieved will likely vary at each vineyard or winery that is visited. So overall, ensuring a transition towards more sustainable production and consumption patterns requires a holistic approach and life cycle thinking, along with the use of certification entities that are seen as key concepts for supporting this claim. As food production systems and consumption patterns are among the leading drivers of impacts on the environment, over time the application of life cycle assessments provide additional elements that can address these inherent variability of these agricultural systems. Since food systems are inherently more variable in both the inventory data and the possible impacts, these approaches can be complementary for promoting an understanding of what it means to be a sustainable vineyard. As we now know, sustainability in the agricultural sector is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Certifications all have their own competing merits, and attempting to create a singular set of metrics that outlines what sustainability is does a disservice to the complexity of the industry itself. Various program styles, level of complexity, and different benchmarking metrics are needed to meet the needs of the growers, consumers, winery owners, gatekeepers, regulatory principals, and other relevant stakeholders. While pursuing these initiatives that balance these sustainability principles requires a solution-based, written formal conservation plan for each vineyard or winery, using a certification to add credibility to these standards is a key concept for marketability. However, it is important to note that no one will ever be able to reach a completely sustainable state because there's always room for improvement. Moreover, as new environmental issues continue to arise through global and local challenges, via environmental degradation, climate change, resource scarcity, etc., these challenges lead to the necessity of the investment in sustainable development to preserve the industry. Moving along the continuous improvement spectrum can be done in many ways, and the implication of these practices can be studied by using life cycle assessments to ensure that improvements are achieved across the environmental spectrum. Depending upon how a grower chooses to enact sustainability practices affects how those metrics are achieved or adapted over the long term. The ideology surrounding sustainability centers around the idea that people are striving towards being sustainable, and they must move down the spectrum so that sustainability principles don't stagnate over time. As research, experience, data, new technological advances are gained over time, it is likely that standards may be modified, thrown out, or added in to ensure that sustainability continues to meet the 3 E's of sustainability. Sustainability is a constantly changing field, and for the wine grape industry to be good stewards to the land, continuous improvement ensures that these natural systems will continue to function, remain diverse, and provide everything it needs in order for the wine grape industry to not only thrive, but live in harmony with the natural world around us. As the world changes, we must continue to strive towards practices that preserve the industry and the planet for future generations. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this has helped shed some light on how to decode what it means to be sustainable in the wine grape industry.